You probably noticed that I'm in a somewhat unfamiliar location. Well, that's because I'm shooting this video at my granny's house. Today is what my pap used to refer to as Miss Daisy Day, when Granny has her hair done. And since Pap died about 10 years ago, it's been a duty, an honor really, that myself and my brother and my dad have sort of traded at various times. It's been my duty for the last few months, and I am alone in Granny's house while she's getting her hair done. I have about half an hour or so until it's time to go pick her up. So I thought, why not shoot a YouTube video? And I was just sitting here thinking, do you think it's at all possible that we could make intersectional atheism into a thing? These are the sorts of thoughts that I have when I'm sitting in my grandmother's house, essentially a second home to me my entire life. I sit around and I think, what about intersectional atheism? I know that for many people, atheism is just a description of a state of unbelief relative to the existence of gods. To many people who identify as atheists, that's all they're talking about. But there is also such a thing as the atheist community. When atheists get together, talk about religion, talk about science, talk about common interests, talk about political issues maybe that are of shared interest to us, we have an atheist community. And when some of us within that atheist community decide to maybe try and do something in terms of social or political action, then we have not just an atheist community, but within that community, an atheist movement. So if there's going to be an atheist movement, and there is, and there has been for some time, I'm not suggesting that there isn't one. There is one, and I feel like in my own paltry way I'm a part of it. But if there is going to be an atheist movement, that movement has to be intersectional if it's going to get anywhere, and if it hopes to have any support and respect from other movements that are similar. One of the most profound things I've ever heard relative to the atheist movement was said by my friend Meridian Frost a couple years ago in a hangout that we were both guests on. And he didn't say anything revolutionary, but the way he phrased it, he stated it in such a succinct way that it opened my eyes and it made everything so clear to me as to how the atheist movement has to relate and has to exist in terms of its character if it wants to truly succeed and have its goals accomplished and recognized in our larger social and political world. And that is, he said, the atheist movement is a human rights movement. And as such, it has to ally itself with other human rights movements. It can't be an enemy of human rights movements, of other human rights movements, and it can't afford to be indifferent to other human rights movements. It can't afford to just narrowly focus only on its own goals and its own interests and ignore those of others. Because for one thing, atheists are such a diverse group. By definition, the only thing that atheists have in common is that state of unbelief in gods. So we're a very diverse group. So atheism, movement atheism, has the potential to be the most intersectional human rights group that there is. Because atheists come from all walks of life. Atheists are men and women. Atheists are of all gender identities, of all sexual orientations, of all nationalities. Atheists are of all ages, of all income levels. Atheists are a huge cross-section of humanity because we are only united in our atheism by that simple state of unbelief. That simple form of atheism that I spoke about at the beginning of this already rather rambling video. So we should be intersectional. And intersectionality is very important. Intersectionality means that you don't just worry about the interests and the concerns of the group that is the center of your movement. You also worry about the other identities, the other categories that members of your movement fall into. When we talk about a concept like privilege, most of us are privileged and underprivileged in various ways, depending on the different categories we fall into and the different ways that we are treated based on how we are perceived by other people. So take me, for instance. I am really ridiculously privileged in almost every way. I'm an American, I'm white, I'm male, I'm cisgender, I'm heterosexual, I'm a native English speaker. While I'm by no means financially well off, in fact, by most estimates, I would be near the poverty line in terms of my income, but my standard of living is fairly good because my wife and I just have each other to take care of and our cat, and we live in a small apartment and we don't have very many bills, and we're fortunate enough to have gotten our educations without having to go into deep debt. So we're actually doing pretty well. So I feel like I'm not underprivileged in that way either. Really, the only category that I fall into, the only identity that I have that is underprivileged is the fact that I'm an atheist. And I don't really feel underprivileged because of my atheism, because I am so privileged in all those other categories I just mentioned. And plus, the circles I move in, both on the internet and in real life, are not circles in which I'm penalized for being an atheist. My friends and family are all either non-religious themselves or religious, but of the sort that is open-minded and tolerant, or at least indifferent to the fact that I'm an atheist. So I don't really feel punished for being an atheist in my life. But if I worked at a workplace or lived in a community or had a family that was very religious, that was not as accepting or tolerant of atheism, then I would certainly feel underprivileged. I would certainly feel discriminated against or perhaps oppressed due to my atheism, as many atheists are, as many atheists do feel. And to take this back to intersectionality, if I were an atheist and I were not a white person, but I were a person of color, I would feel less privileged than I do. If I were poorer than I am, if I were in an economically desperate situation where I really was feeling the pinch of not having a lot of money, then I would feel more underprivileged. And all of these categories that we fall into overlap with one another. And when you are underprivileged in multiple ways, those different forms of underprivilege, those different categories that you are penalized for socially and economically, they amplify each other. If you're poor, then it sucks to be poor no matter what else you are. But if you're poor and black and poorly educated, and you have a bad job or no job, and you live in a violent neighborhood, or you are also gay or transgender, or you're not a native English speaker and you're sort of discriminated against because of how you speak English or because of your accent, all of those things add up and they amplify each other. So intersectionality is very important. That's why it's important when people say that, for instance, they are an intersectional feminist. Their primary concern, if they're describing themselves as an intersectional feminist, then their primary concern, at least in terms of this conversation, is feminism, is women's rights. But as an intersectional feminist, they are also concerned about how transgender people or people of different sexual orientations, or people of different nationalities, or people of various income levels, or various levels of ability, are treated within their movement. If you have an intersectional human rights movement, it's important for you not just to ally yourself with other movements, but also to make sure that you are being aware of how people of different categories and different levels of privilege within your group are being treated. So to take this way back all the way around to the idea of intersectional atheism, if we want to have an atheist movement that means something to us, that means something to our society as a whole, that can do positive things for atheists, then we not only need to continue to bang the drum about secularism and maintaining and strengthening the wall that separates church and state, and fighting for good quality science education, and keeping creationism and intelligent design out of public school science classes, and all of these things that have rightly become very important, prominent issues of the atheist movement. We not only have to keep doing that, but we also have to center and lift up the members of our own atheist community who are underprivileged within the group. We have to make sure that we are making an effort, those of us who are in the more privileged category, those of us who are atheists who have it pretty good relative to others. We have to make sure that we're making an effort to amplify and lift up the voices of atheists who are people of color, and gay atheists, and trans atheists, and atheists who are of lower income backgrounds, and atheists who are of different nationalities, or come from different cultures, or who come from different religious backgrounds. Most atheists in the United States who come from a religious background are former Christians, but there are also atheists who are formerly practicers of Judaism or Islam or Hinduism or many other religions. And we need to make sure that those voices aren't drowned out. One of the best things I've seen in the atheist community, the atheist movement, I should say, my friend Neely is always good to remind me that there is a distinction between the atheist community and the atheist movement. But anyway, one of the best things I've seen in the atheist movement recently is a new show that Tom Leeds hosts on the Secular TV channel, the collaboration channel that I've mentioned a few times before in videos I've done, and I've appeared on their channel for shows a couple of times. Not everybody on that channel is my cup of tea. Not everybody on that channel is someone that I can say I agree with or that I would want to be associated with, but they have a diverse group of contributors. My friend, one of my favorite people, Christy Winters, has done things for them, and Tom Leeds, who I gave a shout out to at the end of the most recent You Had to Ask video, has a show that he just started on Secular TV's channel called One Old White Guy, that is hosted by him, who is the titular old white guy, and the premise of the show is to interview and highlight members of the atheist community who are not old white guys. Because as a future old white guy, I have no problem with old white guys, but I do have a big problem with the face of the atheist movement being dominated and defined by old white guys. I love Richard Dawkins. I think Daniel Dennett is super. And, I was a great fan and admirer of Christopher Hitchens. But I don't like the idea that old white guys are defining the face of the atheist movement. It should be more diverse. It should be more inclusive. And I wish that this show that Tom does would have 1,000 times the audience that it has. Right now, he just started, and Secular TV as a channel is still growing, so the audience for One Old White Guy is not huge at this point. But I would love to see that grow, and I would love to see that activity, that attitude, that idea of those of us who in the atheist movement who are in a more privileged spot, who have things maybe a little easier, or those of us with YouTube channels who have larger audiences, to lift up those who have smaller audiences in the atheist movement and who have something interesting and unique and personal to them to say, and especially those who fall outside of the old white guy category, who can bring something new and fresh and interesting and add their voice and their faces to the face of the atheist community, and remind us that if the atheist movement is to truly be an effective and positive human rights movement, then like the Black civil rights movement, like the gay equality movement, like feminism, like all great modern civil rights movements, human rights movements, it must be intersectional. It must be an ally and a friend to other human rights movements, and it must center and focus on the members of its own movement, of its own group, that are in the most need of lifting up and the most deserving of having the attention and the focus that us white guys, old white guys, and soon to be old white guys have always had and have taken for granted. That's very, very important. And those are just some of the things that were on my mind sitting here in my granny's kitchen. Isn't that weird? The things I think about when I'm alone in my grandmother's house. And I guess I could have just gone over and stared at the china or something. What do you think of this wood paneling? Isn't this great?